Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
San Diego police will begin enforcing the city's unsafe camping ordinance this weekend. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. KPBS reporter Melissa May spoke with city officials and a homeless advocate to give us a picture of what enforcement will look like.
The city's unsafe camping ordinance bans tent encampments in public places when shelter beds are available, and at all times within 2 blocks of schools and parks, canyons, transit centers, and homeless shelters.
When we initially begin implementation of the ordinance, we're going to focus initially around schools and in many of our parks. We cannot have a situation where there are encampments within 2 blocks of a K through 12 schools.
According to Council Member Stephen Whitburn's office, officers in the San Diego Police Department's Neighborhood Policing Division have been trained in the progressive enforcement model and will continue to provide education and outreach to homeless residents about the ordinance. The city says officers will receive a list of open shelter beds in the city intake system each morning. They say if needed, enforcement will be implemented.
If people refuse to take advantage of a shelter or safe sleeping site when it is offered to them, then the law can be enforced. The first time somebody would refuse a shelter bed or safe sleeping site, a police officer would give that person a warning. A second time that they decline shelter or a safe sleeping site, they could receive a misdemeanor citation. And the third time, there could be a custodial arrest.
Janice Wilds is a homeless advocate with Housing for the Homeless. She says that enforcement isn't going to help anything.
A camping ban is not going to house anyone. Housing is what solves homelessness. We know we don't have enough of that. We have to build more of it. We need to have a more humane way to help people on the street other than criminalization, which is fiscally irresponsible.
The city says unsheltered residents who accept a shelter bed will be transported through a coordinated effort between police and homeless outreach organizations. But Wild says the shelters cannot accommodate the needs of seniors, disabled, or medically fragile people.
People will be physically and mentally harmed by this. Think of having to be a nomad in your own city, carting all your things with you in 80-degree heat, with nowhere to stop, because anywhere you stop, you could be cited for encroachment or the camping ban.
One outstanding question is whether San Diego's ordinance is different enough from other camping bans that have been challenged in court to be considered constitutional, says legal analyst Dan Eaton.
I expect that the day the ordinance actually goes into effect, and certainly no later than the first time any attempt is made to enforce the ordinance, there will be a complaint filed in San Diego federal court.
Councilmember Whitburn says he believes the ordinance is on a strong legal footing. The city of San Diego currently has about 2,400 shelter beds, most of which are in use. But the latest point-in-time count data shows there's 3,200 unsheltered homeless people in the city. Melissa May, KPBS News.
Right now, more than 120 million people are under heat alerts across the country, and record-breaking temperatures are not the only threat from Mother Nature. Chris Wynn has the latest.
A sinister-sounding snap, then crash caught on camera as a tree topples on top of a truck in New Jersey.
A guy driving down the street, getting hit, that's a lot.
Strong storms ripping trees up from the roots and triggering flooding across parts of the Northeast.
It was about a 90-second situation that brought all this damage down.
Meanwhile, there's been at least 16 heat-related deaths so far this year in Clark County, Nevada. And as the deadly summer heat expands across the country, excessive heat warnings go into effect Thursday for Northeast cities like New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. In Southwest cities, the high heat history books are being rewritten, with Phoenix seeing 26 consecutive days of temperatures higher than 100 degrees.
I stay inside inside.
The state of Arizona seeing at least 570 heat-related hospital illnesses last week.
We put some of our IVs on ice or cool our IVs so we can cool that internal temperature quicker for those individuals. We also have come up with different ways of creating an ice bath immediately on scene.
There's more than 30 large wildfires burning in the western U.S. Just north of Phoenix, near Prescott Valley, a wildfire has triggered a go alert evacuation order. Flames are also threatening structures in Southern California. And in Oregon, the Golden Fire is destroying homes and damaging miles of fiber optic cables, knocking out the internet and the 911 system in Lake County, while forcing people to leave their homes and flee the flames.
That's all we can do, is just try to rebuild our life and start over.
Chris Wynn, KPBS News.
The heat continues. In fact, there are heat alerts going right through Friday evening for the interior valleys, those being heat advisories, and then out east over the deserts, we're looking at an excessive heat warning. Temperature-wise, as we work our way right into tomorrow, look at Ramona. 102. We're going to be climbing up into the mid-110s around Borrego Springs, even Mount Laguna right around 80 degrees, mid-80s toward Oceanside. Much more on the heat, how long it will continue, and much more coming up.
San Diego's largest community power agency is paying it forward with public grants. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson shows us who stands to benefit.
San Diego Community Power is distributing nearly $400,000 in profits to 10 community groups. The money will fund a variety of local programs focused on renewable energy and energy literacy. The United Women of East Africa landed a $45,000 grant to reach out to the county's about 30,000 East African residents.
We wanted to be able to teach the youth about sustainable energy and how they can change their attitude on energy consumption and how to live green, especially in this day and age where energy is just so expensive.
The San Diego Foundation helped with the application process and will deliver the money to the organizations in this round of funding. San Diego Community Power promised it would invest in the community after the organization began buying electricity for San Diego utility customers this past spring.
We're not sending them out to investors, we're not sending them out to stockholders, but we're keeping it all here local.
San Diego Community Power took the job of buying electricity from San Diego Gas and Electric. The not-for-profit agency promises to only buy renewable energy by 2035. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Buying major items like homes and vehicles may soon be a little more expensive. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates by 1/4 point today and hinted there'd be at least one more rate hike this year. It's the 11th rate hike since last spring and the highest rate level in 22 years. Many analysts say rate hikes could handcuff the country economically. Others say holding rates steady could result in persistently high inflation. Healthcare workers were out picketing in front of Kaiser Permanente Zion Medical Center today. As KPBS reporter Alexander Wynn shows us, these workers are fighting for more than just working conditions.
Dozens of healthcare workers joined the picket line today to bring awareness to critical staffing conditions and a patient care crisis at Kaiser Permanente facilities. It's part of a coordinated protest at more than 40 Kaiser facilities across the state. Kaiser is the nation's largest nonprofit healthcare system.
Hey, Kaiser, you're no good. Treat your workers like you good.
The coalition of Kaiser Permanente unions, representing more than 85,000 frontline workers, is calling on Kaiser to make significant investments in its workforce. The current contract is set to expire September 30th. Both sides have been negotiating since April.
Biggest issues is staffing.
Ultrasound tech Michael Ramey is the president of the Office of Professional Employees International Union, Local 30. He says facilities are understaffed and his members are overworked, and that's affecting morale.
It affects our access to get those people in, to get them cared for, to get their preventative issues taken care of, to get their acute issues taken care of. And so it grossly impacts our quality of care.
These workers say they're not only fighting for better working conditions, they're also fighting for better patient care as well. Food service worker Trayvon Moss has seen firsthand how the staffing shortage affects patients. He says it has delayed food service sometimes up to 2 hours, and patients get mad.
They're just mad because they're hungry, right? It's part of it. You get hungry, you get irritated, you can't feel better. And they didn't come here to get more sick they became to get well.
Kaiser called the picketing a ploy to create bargaining leverage during contract negotiations. In a statement, Kaiser says it has committed to hiring 10,000 new workers, but the healthcare giant says it is facing challenges from a labor shortage, supply chain disruptions, and increases in demand for care.
What kind of power? Union power!
Kaiser says patient care was not affected by today's picket. More picketing is expected this week in Washington, Oregon, and Colorado. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Kaiser Permanente is a corporate supporter of KPBS. A plan to convert a South Bay motel into housing for the homeless moves forward. The city of Chula Vista voted unanimously in favor of the plan during their meeting yesterday evening. City staff estimate the purchase and renovation to cost about $13 million. The motel on Walnut Avenue has 31 rooms. The city also wants to add a safe parking lot next door where people can sleep in their cars.
10 years ago, there really was no homeless in the city of Chula Vista. But you look at Chula Vista, the county, the state, it's become an epidemic, and we need to provide solutions.
The city expects to have converted into housing and safe parking by early 2025. A relatively unknown contract that gives Customs and Border Protection access to San Diego's crime data has advocates worried. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis has the story.
In response to the Trump administration's hardline immigration policies, California passed a series of laws that protect immigrants. Those laws limit cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities. Advocates now say that a deal between the San Diego Association of Governments and Customs and Border Protection violates the spirit of those laws. In June, CBP renewed a contract worth $131,000 that grants them access to the ARGIS criminal database. ARGIS contains data from every law enforcement agency in the county. It includes arrests, traffic citations, and data from license plate readers.
What this access to the ARGIS database does do is that it means that the relationship between a person having an encounter with a local police officer and that encounter then becoming an immigration problem is increased.
Cesar Cuauhtemoc Garcia Hernandez studies what he calls crimmigration, which is how minor criminal activity can lead to serious immigration consequences. He says sharing this data with CBP puts immigrants at risk of being deported for something as minor as driving with an expired registration. To be clear, SANDAC isn't breaking any laws by sharing this data. But Garcia Hernandez says local leaders need to think beyond just the letter of the law.
For the perspective of elected officials, they have to think about what the message is that sends, because the ARGIS database is not limited to severe crimes. It's not limited to one kind of crime or another. It's a real very wide range of encounters with criminal law enforcement agencies.
Another concern with this arrangement is lack of oversight. Erin Tsurumoto Grassi is policy director with Alliance San Diego. She says CBP has proven in the past that it can't be trusted.
There's a long history of abuse, of impunity, not speaking necessarily just to databases, but in general. And so I think that's something that has to be really considered. Like, is this an agency we want to trust to have access?
Tsurumoto Grassi referenced a 2019 incident in which CBP used data to spy on humanitarian workers helping people from the Central American migrant caravan. CBP did not respond to a request for comment.
We have to have a clear understanding of what are the guardrails, or what are the guardrails that are preventing them from accessing data outside of what they're allowed to access.
Dave Moss is the Director of Investigations with the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
In general, what I've seen across California is that there's not a lot of quality control going on in general.
He says memorandums of understanding are designed to prevent abuse, but they aren't always backed up with enforcement mechanisms.
It's really an honor system, like investigate yourself, let us know how you violated it. And so it's not a particularly robust system.
ARGIS Director Anthony Ray and SANDAC Chairwoman Nora Vargas declined interview requests. Records show CBP has been getting ARGIS data since at least 2006. Sandag did respond to questions in writing. In 2019, Sandag updated its ARGIS policies to reflect state laws that limit cooperation between federal and local law enforcement. This included deleting search terms like undocumented. It also now requires users to enter a valid reason for each search. And it put in a disclaimer telling users not to access non-criminal data for immigration enforcement. Still, there are general concerns about the lack of enforcement tools.
Even if they've agreed to do one thing, you can't always trust them to stick to the rules.
This November 2021 exchange between former San Diego Sheriff Bill Gore and County Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer illustrates the limits of local oversight. During a community forum, Lawson-Remer asked whether the Sheriff's Department can be certain that they're catching other agencies breaking the rules.
But how would we find out? I mean, right? Like, how would we?
Sometimes you might not. If somebody picks up the phone and makes a call to somebody, I don't know how you're going to find that out. You do the best you can by educating your officer what the rules are. If you do find out, you handle that misconduct through an investigation and appropriate disciplinary action. But I can't sit here and say and guarantee it's never happened.
So we don't really have a good mechanism to monitor other agencies.
The San Diego Sheriff's Department doesn't share data directly with CBP. However, the department does share it with ARGIS. And ARGIS, they're sharing it with CBP. Tsurumoto Grassi says indirect sharing is just as problematic.
We would argue in general, right, that this entanglement, right, collusion between local law enforcement and federal immigration agencies across the board is going to lead to lack of community trust, which makes all of us less safe.
Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
The truth is out there, and Congress seems determined to find out just what it is. Karen Kafa has a look at what we know about so-called UAPs.
UFOs are real.
As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace.
And the government needs to take reports of sightings more seriously.
These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine.
At least according to testimony from 3 former military and intelligence personnel making their case for more government transparency before a House Oversight Subcommittee Wednesday.
The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies.
In April, the Pentagon said it was tracking some 650 incidents involving unidentified anomalous phenomena that are currently unexplained, but emphasized there was no evidence of extraterrestrial life or of objects that defy physics.
Well, if there's a thing, it's rotating.
But former Navy fighter pilot Ryan Graves and former Navy Commander David Fravor say they have seen UAPs up close and personal, performing unexplainable maneuvers.
We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction.
And believe they may pose a threat to the safety of pilots and the country.
If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety.
The hearing just the latest effort by Congress to find the truth and what it means for us here on Earth.
Am I certain that all of these sightings are aliens? Of course not. But I do believe unidentified aerial phenomenon around our top secret military bases is a possible threat that we have to take seriously.
In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
Wildlife officials in Santa Cruz are trying to capture a sea otter that's gaining worldwide attention. As Zach Fuentes explains, that attention is creating dangerous conditions for other otters.
Another day, another attempt to capture sea otter 841. Both federal and state fish and wildlife officials have been working to capture her since July 2nd. They say she's aggressively approached people and has bitten surfboards. From the start, photographer Mark Woodward has been following those attempts to capture 841. But as 841 celebrity has grown, Woodward says he's noticed a problematic trend.
Over the past week, there's been a number of kayakers and stand-up paddleboarders moving real close to the otters, whether or not it's 841 or any other otter.
These images capture what Woodward's been seeing.
People who are harassing otters, that's just terrible. They need their calories. They don't need to be stressed and swimming away from strangers.
Woodward says last weekend drew especially large crowds.
And it was probably the most crowded I've seen Westcliff Drive, and it was mainly people looking specifically for the otter. And while most of them just stay on shore, you know, it just takes one or two, and a kayak to chase after them to really disturb the whole ecosystem.
Dan Hafley is a board member of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. He says harassing the sea otters can have big impacts.
They're sensitive, and if you start to move towards them, they're going to flee. And this takes a lot of energy. That's energy they could use collecting food or taking care of their young.
Still, Hafley says you can safely enjoy and observe the otters from afar if you follow some key rules.
Don't startle them, don't move towards them, and try to stay away about 10 boat lengths if you're in the water.
Woodward says he has no problem using his camera and large social media platform to single out those who choose to break those rules.
We'll out you to the public and put you on social media, and we will probably also be reporting you to Fish and Wildlife.
And that was Zach Fuentes reporting. Officials have said once the otter is captured, she will be examined at Monterey Bay Aquarium and then rehomed.
Now we are talking about more heat coming up over the course of the next couple of days, though there will be some limitations here at the coast due to some low cloudiness and some fog. An increase in moisture late this week and into next week. That's also going to provide some changes to the temperature and also bring the potential for some wet weather back into the picture. For tonight, we'll be talking about partly cloudy skies. There will be some low clouds at the immediate coast. Once again, reducing visibility. We fall off to 68 degrees, and we're quickly climbing here as we go throughout your Thursday. Oceanside climbing up into the mid-80s. Ramona going well above the historical average up to 102. Look at Borrego Springs well up into the 100 and teens. And as I was talking about a little bit ago, there are heat advisories, widespread heat advisories stretching away from the coast. But once you move into some of the interior valleys and then especially toward the mountains and the deserts, we even see some of those excessive heat warnings. It appears the heat will be peaking though as we go throughout the coming days, and a change is coming up as we go down the road. Now, at the coast, it's going to be very subtle here as we stay put into the 80s the next couple of days, gradually sliding down as we head our way into early next week. Some of the interior valleys, perhaps a little bit more noticeable here, say as we go from tomorrow and Friday to late this weekend. That's when we'll see temperatures dropping off into the upper 80s for highs and staying put there as we go into early next week. And then we work our way into the mountainous terrain. And here, not only will we see temperatures falling as we work our way down the road, we'll also start to notice some increased cloud coverage and even a stray thunder shower as we're looking at down the road here into Monday. So there's some of that moisture making a return as we head our way into early next week. This will also begin to reduce the extent or the severity, the intensity of the heat throughout the deserts will be falling back down into the 90s as we head into Monday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic.
San Diego County is one of the wealthiest areas in the country, so it's easy to forget there are a lot of people here who don't have enough to eat. KPBS reporter John Carroll says it's getting so bad that one local food pantry is worried their supplies may run out.
It's 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and the people here at Sunset Cliffs and Saratoga Avenue in Ocean Beach have already been waiting for hours for food distribution to begin.
Next is two cook. Two cook.
That's Patrick Swanner saying the next person in line gets a bag that has items for cooking. There are also no-cook bags. Swanner is the pantry coordinator for Loaves and Fishes, a food pantry supported by 6 different churches in the OB Point Loma area. He's been doing this for more than 2.5 years.
This is the first time since I've started that I've actually been worried about feeding people.
Swanner says pre-pandemic, Loaves and Fishes got all the food they needed from donations and from the San Diego Food Bank and Feeding San Diego. Then the pandemic hit, terrible in most regards, but not for Loaves and Fishes.
And I know this is going to sound terrible, but the pandemic was great for the benefits that was happening. So the government did open up their hands, they opened up their hearts, and they were like, we're ready to help.
But that financial help dried up in March. Donations only make up about 30% of the food they need. The The rest they have to buy from the food bank and Feeding San Diego.
Feeding San Diego and San Diego Food Bank has it cheaper, and that is great. It helps us out.
But Swanner says some items they have to buy themselves.
Some items are really expensive, and they're items that we care about, like peanut butter and tuna and soups.
As you might imagine, Loaves and Fishes, like other neighborhood food pantries, operates on a shoestring budget.
We'll have volunteers go buy stuff out of their own pockets, and the generosity of everybody has been just so awesome.
But even with that, it's getting harder and harder to put together these bags of food for these people.
I'm 80 years old. I shouldn't be in this line.
80-year-old Richard Searle is a Vietnam veteran. For him, Loaves and Fishes is about much more than food.
I was losing it, okay? And the only thing that kept me together was being able to come here, and just,
They hand out more than food here, and they hand out food not for humans, for dogs and cats, and that all happens right over here. And the woman who leads that effort, her name is Paula. Well, she's bagging up some right now. What are you and your team doing over here, Paula?
Well, we're bagging up dog food and cat food.
Food for furry friends that help in so many ways.
They are so important to their mental health. They are vital to their mental health.
Through these tough times, Patrick Swanner says he never loses hope.
All we have is hope. So even when we run out of food, I'll still be giving hope. I really believe in that. And so, no, I haven't lost hope yet. It's just been harder to find it.
If you'd like to help, the website is sdloavesandfishes.org. Of course, Feeding San Diego and the San Diego Food Bank can always use donations as well. Donations that keep hope alive for so many. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.